He was a billionaire who had everything a person could dream of: private jets, sprawling estates, and the finest doctors at his side. But in a matter of days, his body began to fail, and not even the world's top specialists could explain why. As hope slipped away, the answer came from the most unexpected place: a quiet figure in the background who no one ever noticed. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where you are watching from. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Now, let's jump into the story. Michael Reynard was a man whose life seemed like a perfect picture. He owned a private jet that could take him anywhere in the world. He had luxury villas in Palm Springs, New York, and the south of France. On weekends, he would ride horses across his sprawling ranch in Montana. His face often appeared in magazines that loved to tell stories about the rich and powerful. To everyone looking in from the outside, Michael was living the dream. But dreams can be fragile, and sometimes they can turn into something you never expected. One quiet winter evening, Michael began to feel a strange heaviness in his chest. At first, he thought it was fatigue from back-to-back business meetings. But the heaviness soon became shortness of breath. What began as mild discomfort turned into a sharp pressure that made him pause and grip the edge of his desk. Within days, his energy started to drain away. Simple tasks like walking across a room left him winded. The man who once climbed the stairs of his ranch house without a thought now struggled to take a few steps without stopping. Michael's staff called the best doctors they could find. He was admitted to a private clinic known for treating high-profile patients. This was a place where discretion was valued as much as medical skill. The clinic's hallways were quiet, its rooms filled with the soft hum of advanced machines. Within hours, a team of the country's top specialists gathered around his bed. There were cardiologists, pulmonologists, and even renowned diagnosticians flown in from Boston and Seattle. Later, international experts from Switzerland and Japan joined the effort. They ordered blood tests, scans, and endless examinations. The results showed nothing fatal. Yet Michael's condition grew worse each day. His breathing became shallow. His skin turned pale. The man who had once radiated strength now looked like a shadow of himself. The doctors spoke in low tones outside his room, exchanging theories and adjusting treatments. They prescribed medications, monitored his heart, and kept watch through the night. But no matter what they tried, nothing worked. Michael could see the concern in their eyes each time they returned. It was the same look, no matter who walked in. A quiet acknowledgement that their expertise was failing. As days passed, Michael found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling. The sound of the machines became a constant reminder that time was slipping away. His mind wandered back to his childhood, to moments when life was simpler. He thought of his parents, who had taught him that health was the greatest wealth a person could have. Back then, it was just a saying. Now, it was a truth pressing down on him harder than the weight in his chest. He realized that no amount of money could change what was happening. Billions of dollars could buy comfort, privacy, and attention. But they could not guarantee another breath. In the room, expensive medical equipment surrounded him. Soft lights glowed in the corners, yet he felt more alone than ever. Day after day, the doctors tried new approaches. Specialists came and went. Each one left with the same expression, a mix of frustration and resignation. The clinic staff moved quietly around him, adjusting machines, checking charts, and offering polite smiles. But nothing they did brought lasting relief. Michael stopped asking questions. He no longer wanted to hear about test results or theories. Instead, he focused on breathing through each moment, willing himself to stay awake just a little longer. In the world outside his hospital room, his businesses continued to run. His team handled meetings, signed deals, and kept his empire moving. But inside the walls of that clinic, none of it mattered. The man who had everything was losing the one thing that could not be bought: his health. And as the winter sun set outside the tall windows, Michael closed his eyes, wondering if he would ever feel strong again. The clinic where Michael Reynard stayed was a place of quiet precision. Every hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant, and the floor shone under the dim, warm lights. Doctors moved briskly from room to room, their voices low, their expressions serious. Nurses carried charts and adjusted machines with practiced hands. In this world of white coats and polished shoes, there was one person few ever noticed. Her name was Laura Bennett. She wore a simple blue uniform and pushed a cart filled with cleaning supplies. Her shoes made no sound on the floor. She came and went without interrupting anyone, as if she were part of the building itself. For more than 20 years, Laura had worked in hospitals and clinics. She had no medical degree, no certificates on the wall. But she had something else: a keen eye and quiet intuition. She had seen patients in every stage of illness and recovery. She had watched joy return to families, and she had seen the moments when hope quietly faded. Most people didn't look at her twice. They were focused on doctors, test results, and treatment plans. Laura never minded. Her work was important in its own way. Clean spaces could mean safer spaces. A spotless floor, a dust-free corner, or a wiped-down surface could protect a patient more than anyone realized. On a cold morning, Laura stepped into Michael's room. It was early, just after the night shift had ended. The doctors had left for a short break, and the room was still. Only the soft beeping of the monitors broke the silence. Michael lay in bed, his face pale, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. He looked at the ceiling as if trying to focus on something far away. His hands trembled slightly against the white sheets. Laura paused for a moment. She had seen patients like this before, not in the exact details, but in the way their bodies carried strain and exhaustion. She began her routine, moving quietly to empty the waste bin, adjust the blinds, and wipe down the side table. As she worked, she glanced at Michael again. Something about the air in the room felt heavy. She noticed the faint, musty smell that lingered near the vents. Most people wouldn't catch it, but Laura did. Walking closer to the bed, she spoke softly. "Are you comfortable?" she asked. Michael didn't speak, but his eyes shifted toward her. There was a tiredness in his gaze, but also a flicker of awareness. Without another word, Laura reached to adjust his pillow. She slid her hand gently under the fabric, lifting it so his head rested more easily. Then she took a cool cloth from her cart and placed it on his forehead. She wiped away the thin layer of sweat that had gone unnoticed for hours. Michael's breathing was still shallow, but for a brief moment, it seemed a little easier. Over the years, Laura had learned that sometimes the smallest observations could matter. The way a patient's chest moved, the sound of their breathing, even the color of their skin could tell a story no machine could. She finished tidying the room, but her thoughts stayed on that faint smell from the vent. It wasn't the usual hospital scent. It carried something stale, something that didn't belong in a place meant for healing. After leaving the room, Laura wheeled her cart down the corridor. Instead of heading straight to her next task, she turned toward the service area where the building's ventilation system could be accessed. It was a place she had passed countless times, but today she stopped. In her years of work, she had learned that the air patients breathe matters as much as the medicine they take. She stood there for a moment, looking at the metal panel in the wall. She didn't know exactly what she would find, but the thought of doing nothing didn't sit right with her. The hum of the clinic continued around her. The distant sound of carts rolling, doors opening and closing, voices speaking in hushed tones. Laura reached for her phone. If there was something wrong with the air, she needed someone to check it. She returned to her duties, but her mind was fixed on Michael's pale face and the stale air in his room. She didn't have a title that carried weight in medical meetings. She didn't have access to expensive equipment or advanced treatments. But she had her eyes, she'd had her instincts, and she had the quiet certainty that something in that room was harming him. In a place where everyone looked to the doctors for answers, Laura was beginning to sense that the answer might be somewhere else entirely. Laura Bennett did not usually linger in the maintenance corridors of the clinic. Her job kept her moving from patient rooms to hallways, always cleaning, always making sure the place felt safe. But that morning, she couldn't shake the memory of Michael Reynard's shallow breaths and the faint, stale scent drifting from the air vent above his bed. The metal door to the ventilation access was cold under her hand. She had walked past it hundreds of times in her years of work. It was never her responsibility to check it. But she knew that sometimes responsibility didn't come with a title. It came with noticing what no one else saw. She found one of the maintenance staff, a man named Paul, who had worked at the clinic for a decade. "Would you mind taking a quick look at the vents in room 7? She asked quietly. Paul frowned, glancing at the clipboard in his hands. "Ventilation checks aren't on the schedule for this week," he replied. Laura hesitated for only a moment. "It might be important," she said, her voice steady. "The air in there, it's not right. I think it could be affecting the patient." Paul sighed but followed her to the room. While Michael rested, unaware of the quiet discussion happening just outside, Paul climbed onto a small ladder and removed the vent cover. What they saw stopped them both. The filter inside was thick with gray dust. Dark patches of mold spread across the surface like stains that had been there for months. Small fragments of soot clung to the edges. Paul ran his hand across it and shook his head. "This shouldn't look like this," he muttered. Laura felt a rush of urgency. She had seen patients struggle for air before, but rarely had she found such a clear cause hiding in plain sight. Paul admitted the filter should have been replaced long ago. The clinic's systems were designed to keep the air pure, but if a filter was forgotten or overlooked, the air could become harmful. She knew that if she walked away now, the problem might be ignored again. So she went straight to the head nurse, explaining what they had found. The nurse listened, but hesitated. "The doctors are focused on his medical condition," she said. "This might not be related." Laura's voice didn't rise, but it grew firmer. "He is breathing in that air every second. If it's making him worse, nothing else will help until it's fixed." Perhaps it was her persistence, or perhaps it was the fact that no one could deny the evidence in that dirty filter. But by that afternoon, the clinic approved a full cleaning of the ventilation system in Michael's ward. Maintenance teams worked quietly, replacing filters, scrubbing ducts, and flushing out the air pathways. The musty scent that had lingered in the room was gone by evening, replaced by the faint smell of fresh, clean air. Michael didn't notice it right away, but when he woke the next morning, something felt different. His chest felt lighter. He could take a deeper breath without the sharp tightness that had haunted him for days. The doctors ran their usual tests and were puzzled. Nothing in his treatment had changed, yet his oxygen levels were stronger, his skin warmer. Within hours, his fever began to drop. Word spread quietly among the staff. Some called it coincidence, others suspected there might be more to the story. But Laura didn't speak about it. She simply finished her cleaning rounds, moving from room to room as if nothing unusual had happened. Paul, however, stopped her in the hallway later that day. "You were right," he said simply. "If you hadn't pushed for it, no one would have looked." For the rest of that week, Michael's strength grew steadily. His eyes, once clouded with exhaustion, began to clear. He could sit up longer, talk without gasping for breath, and even smile faintly when the nurses checked on him. The doctors could not point to a single test result or medication that explained his improvement. But Laura knew that sometimes healing came from removing what was harming you. not from adding something new. In the quiet corners of the clinic, where no one kept score of credit or recognition, she allowed herself one small moment of satisfaction. She had done what she could. The rest was in his hands. And in room 7, Michael Raynard was finally breathing the kind of air that could give him a fighting chance. A week had passed since the air in Michael Raynard's room had been cleared. The change was nothing short of remarkable. Each day, he grew stronger. The shallow, strained breaths were replaced with slow, steady ones. The heaviness in his chest began to fade, and his mind, once clouded by exhaustion, was sharp again. He could now walk a short distance to the clinic's small garden, leaning on a cane, but moving with determination. The winter sun fell different on his face, warmer somehow, as if each ray carried the promise of more days ahead. One afternoon, while seated on a bench surrounded by quiet greenery, Michael asked a nurse a simple question. "Who was it?" he said softly. The nurse looked puzzled. "Who noticed the air vent?" he continued. The nurse hesitated, then replied, "Laura Bennett. She's one of our cleaning staff. She insisted we check the ventilation. It seems it made a difference." Michael sat in silence for a moment, thinking about the name. In the blur of doctors and medical equipment, he had barely noticed anyone else. But now, a picture began to form in his mind. A woman moving quietly through the room, adjusting his pillow, wiping his forehead. Later that day, he asked to see her. Laura entered the room modestly, holding her cleaning cart as if she expected to be asked to tidy something. Michael looked at her for a long moment. "I'm told you might have saved my life," he said. Laura shook her head. "I just did my job," she replied. "No," he said firmly. "You did more than your job. You saw what no one else saw." There was no crowd in the room, no cameras, no applause. Just two people speaking quietly. Laura nodded once, gave a small smile, and returned to her work. Michael left the clinic 3 days later. The world outside had gone on as usual. Business deals, markets rising and falling, schedules waiting for his attention. But Michael was not the same man who had entered that clinic weeks ago. In the back seat of his car, he thought about all the people who had helped him. The doctors with their years of training, the nurses with their careful hands, the technicians monitoring every beep and signal. But his thoughts kept returning to Laura, the one person in the background whose persistence had made the real difference. Within a month, Michael announced the creation of the Hands That Heal Foundation. The mission was simple: to support low-wage healthcare workers, the cleaners, aides, and support staff who often worked without recognition yet played an essential role in patient care. The foundation provided scholarships for training, emergency funds for families in crisis, and bonuses for outstanding service. More importantly, it created programs to ensure these workers had a voice, a chance to be heard when they noticed something that could help a patient. Laura's name was never used in public speeches. She preferred it that way. But she received a letter in the mail a few weeks later, written in Michael's own hand. "You reminded me that care is not measured in titles or wealth," it read. "Sometimes the greatest change comes from the smallest act. Thank you for giving me the air to keep going." She placed the letter in a small wooden box at home alongside other keepsakes from her years in the hospital. And then she went back to work, pushing her cart down the quiet hallways, moving from room to room. Life in the clinic returned to its usual rhythm. Patients came and went. Treatments began and ended. Laura remained part of the background, as steady and unnoticed as ever. But for one man, her actions had become a turning point, a reminder that the unnoticed often hold the power to change everything. And in quiet moments, when Michael walked through his foundation's offices or met with staff, he thought about that winter. He thought about the days when each breath was a battle, and the moment when the battle began to turn because someone refused to ignore what they had seen. It was a truth he carried with him now. that help can come from anywhere, and sometimes the person you barely notice is the one who will give you back your life.